The holographic display flickered to life in the cramped quarters of the Stellar Pioneer, casting an eerie blue glow across Jack Thompson's face. He sat straight in his chair as 5 alien faces appeared before him, each wearing the same grave expression. The Galactic Council rarely called emergency meetings, and they never brought good news. Biologist Thompson, the central figure, spoke, its crystalline features catching the light. "We must discuss your upcoming mission to DB-427. Jack nodded, trying to hide his excitement behind a professional facade. After 3 years of studying space wildlife, this was his first solo mission. "Is there a problem, Council members?" "We're canceling your mission," another Council member stated, their tentacles writhing with concern. "The planet's apex predator species is too dangerous. We've lost 3 research teams in the past month alone." Jack leaned forward, his brown eyes widening. "Lost? What exactly happened to them?" The Council shared uncomfortable looks before displaying footage on his screen. Jack watched in fascination as a massive creature moved through the darkness of DB-427's forests. Its movements were fluid, almost elegant, despite its intimidating size. 6 limbs ended in razor-sharp claws that could tear through reinforced metal like paper. Its skin seemed to shift colors, blending perfectly with the surrounding vegetation. "We call them shadow claws," the first Council member explained. "They've killed 27 researchers so far." The survivors described them as intelligent, merciless, and impossible to predict. "Even our most advanced defense systems failed to protect the research teams." Jack studied the footage more carefully, noting the creature's behavior patterns. Something didn't add up. "Have we tried non-aggressive approaches? All this footage shows armed teams and defense systems. Of course they'd react hostilely." "You don't understand, Thompson. These aren't simple animals. They're killing machines." The last team had strict orders to observe from a distance. The Shadow Claws hunted them down anyway. But Jack had noticed something in the footage. The way the creatures moved in formation, how they used the environment to their advantage. This wasn't mindless aggression. This was coordinated action. "With all due respect, Council members, I think we're missing something here. These beams show signs of advanced intelligence. Maybe we're the ones approaching this wrong. Are you suggesting we continue risking lives based on your hunch?" The third Council member's voice dripped with disbelief. Jack stood up, his voice firm but respectful. "I'm suggesting we try something different. Look at their pack movements. That's not just instinct. They're communicating, planning. We're treating them like mindless beasts, and they're responding to that treatment." The Council chambers fell silent. Jack took a deep breath and continued, "Let me go. Alone. No weapons, no aggressive defense systems, just observation equipment and basic survival gear." "That's suicide," one of the Council members muttered. "Maybe," Jack admitted. "Or maybe it's our chance to understand something extraordinary. Isn't that why we're out here? To learn, to understand, to discover." The crystalline Council member leaned forward. "You understand that if we agree to this, we cannot guarantee your safety. The Stellar Pioneer will maintain orbit, but emergency extraction might be impossible depending on the situation." "I understand," Jack replied, his heart racing with a mixture of fear and excitement. Sometimes the greatest discoveries require the biggest risks. After what felt like hours, the Council reached their decision. "Very well, Biologist Thompson. We'll allow this mission to proceed, but with conditions. You must maintain hourly check-ins. At the first sign of aggressive behavior, you return to your ship immediately, and you will carry an emergency beacon at all times." Jack nodded, already mentally preparing for what lay ahead. As the holographic display faded, he turned to look out his small window at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, on DB-427, was a species that had the entire Galactic Council terrified. But where others saw monsters, Jack saw possibility. Every creature in the universe had its own way of thinking, its own reasons for acting. Understanding those reasons was his job. his passion. He pulled up the footage again, watching the shadow claws move through their forest home. "What are you really trying to tell us?" he whispered to himself. "And why hasn't anyone bothered to listen?" The Stellar Pioneer's engines hummed softly as it continued its journey through space, carrying Jack toward either the greatest discovery of his career or his final mission. Either way, he was about to change how the galaxy understood its most feared predators. The morning sun of DB-427 painted the alien forest in shades of deep purple and blue. Jack Thompson adjusted his observation gear as he crouched behind a fallen tree, his eyes fixed on a clearing ahead. He'd been on the planet for 3 days now, and what he'd seen had already changed everything. He thought he knew about the shadow claws. Recording log entry 47. He whispered into his device. "The shadow claws aren't just hunters. They're tool users." In the clearing, one of the creatures was doing something remarkable. It had found a hard-shelled fruit, and instead of simply crushing it with its powerful jaws, it was using a rock to carefully crack it open. Not only that, but it had gathered several fruits and was processing them in what could only be described as an assembly line. "They're not mindless killers," Jack continued recording. "They're problem solvers. Look at those movements. Precise, calculated. This isn't just instinct." A sudden crack of thunder made Jack jump. He looked up at the sky, now dark with approaching storm clouds. The weather on DB-427 could turn deadly in minutes, and his shelter was a good hour's walk away. "Base, this is Thompson. I need to find closer shelter. These storms can strip the flesh off bones." The radio crackled. "Confirmed. There's a cave system half a kilometer to your east. Be careful." Jack packed his gear quickly and started moving. The wind picked up, carrying stinging particles of sand and debris. He pulled his protective mask tighter and quickened his pace. The first drops of acid rain began to fall as he spotted the cave entrance. He rushed inside, shaking off his rainproof coat. As his eyes adjusted to the darkness, he froze. There, in the back of the cave, was a shadow claw. It was injured. A deep gash ran along one of its middle limbs, probably from a fight or accident. The creature's natural bioluminescent spots pulsed weakly, creating patterns of light that danced across the cave walls. The shadow claw noticed him. Its head turned, 6 eyes focusing on Jack with an intensity that made his heart race. But something was different about its reaction. Instead of the aggressive response he'd been warned about, the creature seemed curious. Jack slowly raised his hands, showing he carried no weapons. "Easy there, big fellow. I'm not here to hurt you." The shadow claw's spots pulsed in a rhythm he hadn't seen before. It made a soft clicking sound, tilting its head as it watched him. Despite its injury, it wasn't showing any signs of aggression. "You're hurt," Jack said softly, pointing to the wound. "I can help, if you'll let me." He reached for his medical kit, moving with deliberate slowness. The creature's spots flickered rapidly, but it didn't move to attack. Instead, it shifted slightly, giving Jack a better view of its injury. "Well, would you look at that?" Jack whispered, amazed. "You understand, don't you?" The storm raged outside as Jack carefully approached. The shadow claw's bioluminescent spots created complex patterns that seemed to respond to his movements. He noticed that its gray-blue coloring reminded him of storm clouds, and in that moment, he made a decision. "I'm going to call you Storm," he said, taking another step closer. "And I think you and I are about to prove the entire Galactic Council wrong." As he treated the wound, Storm remained perfectly still, watching Jack's every move with intelligent eyes. The creature's spots pulsed in sync with Jack's heartbeat, creating a beautiful display of light and shadow. "Base, this is Thompson," he called in after finishing the treatment. "You're not going to believe this, but I think we've been looking at these beings all wrong. They're not just intelligent, they're empathetic. I've just had first contact, and it's nothing like what we expected." The radio was silent for a long moment before crackling to life. "Thompson, return to ship immediately. This is a direct order." Jack looked at Storm, who was now examining its treated wound with obvious interest. Negative, base. I'm staying. Something remarkable is happening here, and I'm not walking away from it. Outside, the storm began to fade, but inside the cave, a different kind of storm was brewing. One that would change the galaxy's understanding of its most feared predators forever. Biologist Thompson, your actions are in direct violation of safety protocols. The holographic council member's voice filled Jack's makeshift cave shelter. You were ordered to return to your ship immediately. Jack sat cross-legged on the ground, Storm resting nearby, its bioluminescent spots creating gentle patterns in the dimness. Council members, with all due respect, if I had followed that order, we wouldn't have made the biggest breakthrough in xenobiology this decade. The past week had changed everything. After treating Storm's wound, Jack had discovered something extraordinary about the Shadow Claw's bioluminescence. It wasn't just beautiful, it was language. Look at this, Jack said, holding up his tablet to show recorded footage. Storm doesn't just make random light patterns. Watch what happens when I speak. The footage showed Jack saying simple words while Storm's spots pulsed in specific patterns. More remarkably, the patterns were consistent for each word. They're learning our language, Jack explained, excitement clear in his voice. And I'm learning theirs. Those spots aren't just for show. They're a sophisticated communication system. One of the council members leaned forward, crystal features catching the light. This is unexpected, but it doesn't change the fact that these creatures have killed our research teams. Jack stood up, careful not to make any sudden movements that might startle Storm. About that, I've made another discovery. Storm showed me something yesterday. He switched to different footage, showing Storm leading him to a clearing. There, embedded in the ground, were the remains of automated defense turrets and weapon systems. All our previous teams went in armed to the teeth, Jack said. We treated them like monsters, so they defended themselves. Look at this next part. The footage continued, showing Storm approaching the wreckage. Its spots flashed in a pattern Jack had come to recognize as danger or warning. Then, Storm picked up a piece of the turret and demonstrated how it had fired at them. They remember, Jack explained. They're not mindless killers. They're protecting their home from what they see as hostile invaders. We've been the aggressors all along, just too blind to see it. The council chambers fell silent. Finally, the lead member spoke. While this is enlightening, it doesn't excuse your disregard for protocol. You will return to your ship immediately. Storm, who had been quiet until now, suddenly rose and moved closer to Jack. Its spots began pulsing in a complex pattern that Jack had never seen before. He grabbed his tablet, recording frantically. Wait, he said to the council. Storm's trying to tell us something new. The creature's bioluminescence created a stunning display, and then, to everyone's shock, it began mimicking the holographic council members' appearances using its color-changing skin. Incredible, one council member whispered. It understands that we're different species communicating. Jack nodded enthusiastically. Exactly. And there's more. Storm, show them the greeting. Storm's spots pulsed in a simple pattern, one Jack had taught it, meaning friend. Then, to the council's amazement, the creature raised one of its clawed limbs in a perfect imitation of a human wave. They're not just intelligent, Jack said softly. They're reaching out to us. All we have to do is stop treating them like monsters and start treating them like equals. The council members conferred quietly among themselves. Finally, the lead member turned back to Jack. We need time to discuss this development, but for now, you may continue your research, with conditions. Jack could hardly contain his relief. Thank you, council members. You won't regret this. After the hologram faded, Jack turned to Storm, whose spots were pulsing with what he now recognized as excitement. Well, friend, we did it. First step, anyway. Storm responded by creating a pattern of lights that Jack had taught it, the pattern for together. Jack smiled, reaching out to carefully pat the creature's arm. Yeah, together. Now let's show them what else you can do. Outside the cave, the alien sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant colors. But inside, an even more beautiful light show was taking place, one that represented the first true communication between humanity and the galaxy's most misunderstood species. Jack couldn't believe what he was seeing. After 3 weeks on DB-427, Storm had finally decided to show him something extraordinary. They stood at the edge of a vast clearing, and below them stretched a sight that made Jack's heart race with excitement: a Shadowclaw community. Recording log entry 127. Jack whispered into his device. Storm has brought me to what appears to be their main settlement. I'm counting at least 30 individuals, including those young ones. Indeed, smaller Shadowclaws played in the center of the clearing, their spots glowing with bright, playful patterns. Adult Shadowclaws watched over them, their own bioluminescence creating gentle, soothing rhythms. Storm's spots pulsed with what Jack now recognized as pride. The creature had been gradually introducing him to its world, piece by piece, but this was different. This was everything. They're not just social, Jack continued recording. They have families, education systems. Look at that adult teaching the young ones to crack those hard fruits we saw earlier. They're passing down knowledge. He watched as one young Shadowclaw struggled with a particularly tough fruit. Instead of taking over, the adult created encouraging light patterns, guiding the youngster to find the right angle. When the little one finally cracked it open, the entire group's spots lit up in celebration. Base, are you seeing this? Jack transmitted. Every aggressive encounter we've had with them, it was just them protecting these little ones. We've been the threats all along. The radio crackled. We're recording everything, Thompson. The council won't be able to ignore this evidence. Storm gently nudged Jack, its spots forming the pattern for follow. They moved closer to the settlement, and something remarkable happened. Instead of fleeing or attacking, the other Shadowclaws simply turned to watch them, their spots creating curious patterns. A larger Shadowclaw approached them, its movements graceful despite its size. Its spots pulsed in a complex sequence, which Storm answered. Jack realized he was witnessing their formal communication for the first time. They had a leadership structure, he recorded. And Storm's introducing me to them. The leader Shadowclaw approached Jack, its 6 eyes studying him intently. Then, to his amazement, it raised a limb in the human greeting gesture he had taught Storm. Jack's throat tight with emotion, he returned the wave. Hello, friend. The leader's spots created the pattern for friend, the same one Jack had taught Storm. The message was clear. Storm had been teaching others about him. Base, Jack called in, his voice barely containing his excitement. We need to completely rewrite everything we thought we knew about this species. They're not just peaceful unless threatened. They're actively curious about us. They want to communicate. He spent the next few hours observing and recording. He watched as Shadowclaws worked together to build shelters, shared food, and taught their young. Their bioluminescent communication was more complex than he had initially realized, with different patterns for emotions, ideas, and even abstract concepts. Look at this, he recorded, focusing on a group working together to move a fallen tree. They're using their light patterns to coordinate their efforts. It's not just communication. It's cooperation, planning, problem-solving. As the day progressed, Jack noticed something else. The young Shadowclaws, initially kept at a distance, began moving closer, curious about the strange visitor. Their spots pulsed with simple patterns, the equivalent of children's questions. They're not born fearing other species, Jack realized. They learn to fear based on experience. But if we can show them friendship instead of hostility. The leader approached again, this time carrying one of the hard fruits. It demonstrated a new way of opening it, one that required less strength but more skill. It was teaching him. Base, Jack transmitted. Tell the council they need to see all of this. The Shadowclaws aren't just intelligent enough for peaceful contact. They're advanced enough to be our teachers. We've been so wrong about them, and it's time to make it right." As the alien sun began to set, Jack sat among the shadow claws, watching their spots create patterns of light that turned the gathering darkness into a symphony of color and meaning. He had come seeking to understand the galaxy's deadliest predator, only to find something far more precious, a new kind of friendship that would change everything. The peace of DB-427's morning was shattered by the roar of landing engines. Jack burst out of his shelter, Storm right behind him, as a massive research vessel descended through the purple clouds. This wasn't the Stellar Pioneer's supply ship. This was something else entirely. "Base, what's going on?" Jack called into his communicator. "I wasn't told about any other ships arriving." The radio crackled with urgent voices. "Thompson, get out of there now. It's the Military Research Division. They've somehow gotten approval for a capture operation." Jack's blood ran cold. He looked at Storm, whose spots were pulsing with alarm patterns. The creature had already figured out something was wrong. "How many?" Jack asked, watching as the ship landed in a cloud of dust. "Full team. 20 personnel, heavy capture gear. They're saying your footage of the settlement gave them everything they needed to plan this operation." The ship's doors opened with a hiss, and armored figures began emerging. They carried heavy stun nets and containment devices. Jack had seen this kind of equipment before. It was designed to bring down and trap large predators. "Storm," Jack said urgently, creating the light pattern for danger with his portable light tool. "You need to warn the others. Get the young ones to safety." Storm's spots flashed in understanding, but the creature didn't leave. Instead, it stood its ground beside Jack, creating a pattern he'd never seen before, one that somehow combined protect and friend. "This is Dr. Wells of the Military Research Division." A voice boomed across the clearing. "Biologist Thompson, you are ordered to step away from the specimen and return to your shelter." Jack stepped forward instead, placing himself between the armed team and Storm. "These creatures are sentient beings. They have families, a society. You can't just—" "We have full authority." Wells cut him off, approaching with 2 armed guards. "These creatures' natural abilities make them perfect for military applications. The Council has approved their capture for study." "The Council doesn't know the truth," Jack argued, his mind racing. He could see more shadow claws emerging from the forest behind him, their spots pulsing with warning patterns. "If you do this, you'll destroy months of peaceful contact. They'll never trust another human again." Wells smiled coldly. "Trust isn't necessary for our purposes. Teams, move in. Capture the largest specimens first." The armed personnel spread out, raising their weapons. But something unexpected happened. Storm stepped forward, its spots creating a complex pattern that spread to the other shadow claws. Instead of fleeing or attacking, they formed a circle around Jack. "What are they doing?" one of the soldiers asked nervously. Jack watched in amazement as the shadow claw's spots began pulsing in perfect unison, creating a display so bright it was almost blinding. Their natural camouflage shifted and changed, making it impossible to tell where one creature ended and another began. "They're protecting me," Jack realized, "just like I tried to protect them." Wells raised his weapon. "This changes nothing. Prepare the stun nets." But before anyone could move, Storm created a new pattern, one that made all the soldiers' electronic equipment spark and fail. The Shadow Claws had learned more from observing humans than anyone had realized. They understood technology, and they knew how to disable it. "Impossible," Wells shouted as his weapon died in his hands. "These are just animals." Jack couldn't help but smile. "No, they're not. They never were. And you just learned it the hard way." The Shadow Claws moved as one, their defensive circle expanding to push the armed team back toward their ship. No violence, no attacks, just an unstoppable wall of unified movement and dazzling light. "Base," Jack called in, watching as the military team retreated in confusion. Tell the Council they need to see this. The Shadow Claws aren't just intelligent. They're capable of coordinated strategic action, and they just chose to handle this without a single aggressive move. Storm's spots pulsed with what Jack now recognized as satisfaction. The creature had protected its friend without harming anyone, proving once and for all that the galaxy's deadliest predators had evolved far beyond violence as a first response. The military ship lifted off in defeat, leaving Jack standing among his Shadowclaw defenders. He realized that today had changed everything. Now no one could deny the truth about these remarkable beings, or the power of the friendship that had made this peaceful resolution possible. 2 days after the failed military operation, Jack sat cross-legged in the Shadowclaw settlement, surrounded by curious observers. On the ground before him lay an array of small devices he'd been working on, each one designed to emit specific patterns of light. Recording log entry 156, he spoke into his recorder. The Universal Translator Project is ready for its first real test. Storm sat beside him, watching intently as Jack activated the first device. It projected a complex pattern of lights, one that meant welcome in Shadowclaw communication. The leader of the community, whom Jack had started calling Elder, stepped forward to examine it. The concept is simple, Jack explained to his recorder while Elder studied the device. We've been using basic light patterns to communicate, but there's so much more to their language. These devices can create and record complex patterns that match their natural bioluminescence. Elder's spots suddenly pulsed in an exact copy of the device's pattern, then added more complex variations. Jack quickly adjusted his controls, and the device responded, creating new combinations. It's working. Jack couldn't keep the excitement from his voice. They're not just copying the patterns, they're expanding on them, teaching us more complex forms of their language. The young Shadowclaws gathered closer, their spots flickering with curiosity. One of them reached out and touched a device, causing it to shift colors. Instead of pulling away in fear, the youngster's spots pulsed with delight. "Base, are you seeing this?" Jack transmitted. They're naturally curious about our technology when it's presented peacefully. This could revolutionize interspecies communication. The radio crackled. "The Council is watching, Thompson. They're impressed." Jack worked through the day, with Storm and Elder helping him refine the patterns. They discovered that Shadowclaw communication wasn't just about the patterns themselves. Timing, intensity, and color all carried different meanings. "Look at this sequence," Jack recorded, as Elder demonstrated a particularly complex pattern. "It's not just a word or phrase, it's a complete story. They can convey entire histories through these light displays." The breakthrough came when one of the younger Shadowclaws figured out how to adjust the device's settings on its own. Its spots pulsed with triumph as it created new patterns, effectively speaking through the technology. "This is extraordinary," Jack transmitted to base. "They're not just learning to use our technology. They're improving it. They understand the principles behind it." As the alien sun began to set, Jack gathered the council members via hologram to demonstrate what they'd achieved. The Shadowclaws, now comfortable with the human technology, put on a stunning display. "Council members," Jack said proudly, "watch this." Elder stepped forward, its spots creating a pattern that the devices translated into clear, simple terms. "We greet you with peace. We offer friendship. We share knowledge." The council chambers erupted in amazed murmurs. One member stepped forward, crystal features catching the light. "This is unprecedented. You've achieved true communication with them." "No," Jack corrected gently. "They achieved communication with us. We just had to stop seeing them as monsters and start seeing them as equals." Storm created a new pattern, which the devices translated. Humans learn quickly when they listen with their hearts instead of their fears. The lead council member was quiet for a long moment. "It seems we owe both you and the Shadowclaws an apology, Biologist Thompson. Your methods, unorthodox as they were, have opened up possibilities we never imagined." As if to emphasize this point, the young Shadowclaw who had mastered the device created a new pattern, one that combined human and Shadowclaw communication styles in a way neither species had seen before. "That's what this has always been about," Jack said, watching the young one teach others its new discovery. "Not just learning their way or teaching them ours, but finding something new together." The sun's last rays caught the crystalline surface of the translation devices, sending rainbow patterns dancing across the clearing. The Shadowclaw's spots pulsed in harmony with these new lights, creating a display that symbolized something profound. The moment when two species truly began to understand each other. "Base," Jack transmitted softly. "Make sure this is all recorded. This isn't just first contact anymore. This is first understanding. And it's only the beginning." The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council looked very different from the last time Jack had stood here. Gone were the suspicious glares and fearful whispers. Instead, the room buzzed with excitement as delegates from across the galaxy gathered to witness something unprecedented. Jack stood at the center of the chamber, Storm by his side. The Shadowclaw's spots pulsed with calm confidence, creating patterns that the new translation devices rendered into words everyone could understand. 3 months ago, Jack addressed the assembly. "You knew the Shadowclaws only as the galaxy's deadliest predators. Today, they stand before you as equals, ready to join the Galactic Council as its first non-humanoid members." Elder stepped forward, its massive form moving with graceful dignity. The translation devices captured its complex light patterns. "We have learned much from humans, especially from our friend Jack. They showed us that different does not mean dangerous. That understanding can bridge any gap." The lead council member rose, crystal features catching the light. "When biologist Thompson first defied our warnings, we thought him foolish. Now, we recognize him as a pioneer. The protocols he developed for peaceful first contact will become the standard for all future encounters." Jack smiled, remembering those early days. The real breakthrough wasn't in any protocol. It was in choosing to see past our fears and preconceptions. The Shadowclaws were never the monsters we imagined. We just never gave them a chance to be anything else. As if to demonstrate this point, a young Shadowclaw, the same one who had first mastered the translation technology, stepped forward. Its spots created a pattern that combined traditional Shadowclaw communication with elements inspired by human technology. The translation appeared in the air. "We offer a gift to the Council. Our scientists have worked with human engineers to develop new ways of using our bioluminescent technology. We can help ships navigate dangerous space, heal injuries, and share knowledge in ways never before possible." The chamber erupted in appreciative murmurs as the young Shadowclaw demonstrated, its spots creating patterns that transformed into complex three-dimensional maps and diagrams in the air. "This is just the beginning," Jack explained. "The Shadowclaw's ability to communicate through light, combined with their problem-solving skills, opens up possibilities we're only starting to understand." Storm's spots pulsed with what Jack now recognized as pride, not just in their achievements, but in their friendship. The creature had come a long way from that first meeting in a storm-swept cave. The lead council member spoke again. "In recognition of this historic moment, and of the bridge built between our species, we have 2 announcements to make." Jack listened as the council first officially recognized the Shadowclaws as a fully sentient species with all the rights and protections that status entailed. Then came the second announcement. Biologist Jack Thompson, step forward. Jack did so, Storm moving with him as always. "Your methods challenged our assumptions. Your courage opened our eyes. And your friendship with the Shadowclaws showed us what is possible when we look past our fears. We hereby appoint you as the first ambassador to the Shadowclaw species." The chamber filled with the strange but beautiful combination of applause from the humanoid species and luminescent celebrations from the Shadowclaws present. Jack felt Storm's gentle nudge and turned to see his friend creating a pattern he'd never forget, one that meant family. "Thank you," Jack said to the council, his voice thick with emotion. "But the real thanks belongs to someone else. He turned to Storm. "You could have killed me that first day in the cave. Instead, you chose to trust. You chose friendship over fear. Everything else grew from that moment." Storm's response needed no translation. The creature raised its front limb in the human gesture for greeting, the same simple wave that had started their journey of understanding. As Jack looked around the chamber, he saw not just the end of one journey, but the beginning of many more. Humans and Shadow Claws working together, learning from each other, proving that the greatest discoveries come not from fear and force, but from courage, trust, and the simple willingness to see others not as they appear, but as they truly are. The galaxy's deadliest predators had become its newest allies, all because one human had dared to believe in the power of friendship over fear. And in that victory, both species had found something greater than either could have achieved alone. They had found understanding.